Worship with the Universalist Unitarian Church in Peoria. My name is Reverend Jennifer Innis. It is my great joy to be the minister with this congregation of people of all ages at all stages of life. It is a beautiful, glorious day wherever we are gathering, however we are coming together for church this morning. Welcome. It is so good to be with you. Together, as a congregation, we strive to live into our mission of embracing freedom, loving inclusively, growing in mind, body, and spirit, and adding to the wholeness and the healing of the world. And in living that mission, we recognize our relationships and our obligations of which we are a part. For this is the ancestral home of the Peoria people. They assisted the first European settlers as they came down the Illinois River. And so every week we honor the Peoria people for who they were and for who they are today. So I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. This is the first Sunday of our monthly theme of courage, and I will tell you, it is an act of courage to show up with a community of people, because we are making the effort to be present, to offer ourselves, to receive what we may find around us, and to be in that lived conversation that is for our own benefit as individuals, and also to discover what we might create together as a body, as a people. So if you are new to us, please stay after the service and join us for coffee in Fellowship Hall. And if you're also on Zoom, please stay and visit in the chat room as well. Now, I want to remind folks this is a great time, if you haven't done so already, to turn your respective devices to buzz or silent for worship mode. And also, I want to thank everybody who's been wearing name tags. That's enormously helpful, because I don't know about you, but my brain really needs all the help it can get these days. So thank you for wearing name tags. We have plenty. If you've forgotten yours today, or if you're new to us this morning, thank you. Let's see. So for our announcements today, we have, in particular, looking at this coming week, October 2nd. Oh, yeah. October is when we do courage, but no small time for courage. We'll get there next week. There's always room for courage, right? Always. So next Sunday, October 2nd, we have our Connection Fair, which is an opportunity for committees and groups and so on to kind of show off a little, be a little visible, let us know kind of that you're here, and for us to kind of check out what's around the congregation. This is an excellent opportunity to kind of refresh. What is it that is available for folks to be involved with, for people to be related to, for doing a little service on a beautiful day, such as today, for example, and for all the ways that we create this congregation together. There's worship, there's religious education, there's social impact, caring for the building and grounds, and so much more. Oh, and let me tell you about one in particular, and that's hospitality. The hospitality team is the body that helps coordinate and makes possible all the lovely coffee and tea and lemonade and so on that we enjoy after service every Sunday. And we need a little boost in staffing for that as well. We're kind of down to 2 people who are really doing a lot of it with the help of various volunteers. So we could use a little bit of help. This next coming couple of Sundays, we need some folks who can staff the coffee and also might want to be part of the ongoing hospitality team to make sure that we're regularly providing refreshments. And let me give you the fair notice that there is not an enormous expectation of having like elaborate food happening. This is really about the drinks. And folks have been bringing in nibbles for us to share and enjoy. And so you're putting out what's in the kitchen, not having to make an enormous spread every Sunday. So just to manage that as well. And if you'd like to know more about the hospitality team, I think Marianne Shin, our lovely chair, is here today, and she would be the best source of information. All right. But very much I want to encourage folks to come to the Connection Fair next Sunday. There's going to be a scavenger hunt, yes, scavenger hunt with fun prizes. One of the ways that people draw in folks to the tables is that they have a little bit of a competitive notion about what treats to offer. So you have to check out the tables to see what are the best munchies, and we'll, see how that goes from there too. So thank you for all of your help and all of your support for this congregation. And now, this month, September, is leading up to refreshing our covenant groups for the year. In that note, I want to invite Sarah Allen to come forward and talk about our small groups.
Good morning. So what does a covenant circle do? What do we do in a covenant circle? How many people here, raise your hand if you're in a covenant circle or you have been? Oh, a good number of people. Then you already know how wonderful covenant circle fellowship can be. Well, what do we do in a covenant circle? Mostly, we listen. We listen to each other. If there's 8 people in a covenant circle, you're going to spend 7/8 of your time listening and only 1/8 of your time talking, if everything works the way it's supposed to work. Covenants are statements of the way that we will be together. Every covenant is unique, but many of the principles are the same. The principles that most covenants have in common are that we don't offer advice to each other. We don't tell anybody how to solve their problems. We listen with an ear toward understanding rather than judging. In our everyday lives, most of the time we're listening, and most of the time we're thinking, boy, I wish you'd be quiet so I could tell you what I think. But that's not how covenant circles work. In covenant circles, we just listen to each other. And we listen without judgment, which is a wonderful thing. Listening can be joyful. Last night, I spent $10 to go to the Peoria Storytelling Convention here in Peoria and listen for 2 hours to people telling stories without saying anything myself, and that was wonderful. And listening in a covenant circle is more wonderful because you're listening to your friends. Just it's joyful to feel that we can be ourselves with someone and say what we mean and trust that what we say will be understood in the way we say it. Receiving the gift of another person's honesty, truth, vulnerability, depth, listening for the connection that's being built between the two of you, listening as someone is confident enough to open up their everyday self and let you in. I recently read an article, actually I read it several years ago, about an interview an author conducted with former President Obama. She was writing a book about his habit when he was in office of reading 10 letters a day, just picking letters out of a pile. He said, in part, "I think I understood that if someone writes a letter and they get any kind of response, that there is a sense of being heard. I understood that if I could at least let them know that I saw them and heard them, maybe they would feel a little bit less lonely." That's one of the great perks of being in a covenant circle. The author said, "The notion of being heard seems to be embedded throughout everything that you have said." And Obama replied, "I learned that if you listen hard enough, everybody has a sacred story. That they're willing to share it with you if they feel you actually care about it. And that is the glue around which relationships are formed." So I can't say enough about how wonderful covenant circles are and how it's an opportunity to make really close friends in the church. It's an easier place to make friends than coffee hour. So there's a sign-up sheet in the atrium today, and new covenant circles will start in October. I hope you all think about joining one.
Thank you, Sarah. And now I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 346, "Come Sing a Song with Me." Please be seated. And let me invite Patrick, Nate, and Abby forward for our opening and our chalice lighting. Hi. Here.
All right, so together. We gather in reverence before the wonder of life, the wonder of this moment, the wonder of being together, so close yet so far apart. Each hidden in our own secret chamber, each listening, each trying to speak, yet none fully understanding, none fully understood. We gather in reverence before all intangible things that eyes see not, nor ears can detect, that hands can never touch, that space cannot hold, and time cannot measure. Each morning we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and give back.
And now we receive the gift of music from our choir.
Our time for all ages today relates to our sermon today because it is the story of one of the great people in our history, who was a contemporary of Margaret Fuller. So this morning, we will be learning about Maria Mitchell. An infinity of questions. This is adapted from A Lamp in Every Corner and the UU Kids book. What could this be? It's black, like a deep hole. It's dark. Have you heard the saying, black as night? Maybe it's night. Let's see what else we have. That helps. It looks like the night sky. Have you ever looked at the stars at night when the sky is really dark like this? Have you ever tried to count all the stars? Have you seen a constellation like the Big Dipper? This is a story about a young girl who was fascinated by the night sky and grew up to be a famous woman astronomer. Her name was Maria Mitchell. Maria was full of questions. When she was 2, she would ask, "What? What is this? What is that?" When Maria was 3, she would ask, "How? How does this work? How do we know?" When Maria was 4, she asked, "Why? Why does it get dark at night? And why are there stars?" Her parents tried to answer her questions as best as they could, but no matter how many questions she had, they couldn't find all the answers. And Maria always had more. She asked questions at home and at school and at her Quaker meeting house. And she asked questions of everyone that she met. Hundreds of questions, thousands of questions, an infinity of questions from one little girl. Maria lived long ago with her family on an island. And at night, she and her father would climb the stairs to the top floor of their house, and then they would take a ladder and get onto the roof. From the top of the house, Maria could see far out to sea and far above her to the stars. Hundreds of stars, thousands of stars, an infinity of stars, and one little girl. "I love the stars," she would say to her father, and they would look through a telescope to see far into the sky. And then Maria would start to ask questions. Where do the stars come from? How old are they? Why do they shine? How many are there? Some questions her father could answer, and some he could not. So Maria set out to find the answers herself. "I want to be an astronomer and study the stars," said Maria to her father one day. And her father thought for a moment, and he knew that no matter how smart a girl was, in those days and at that time, she could not go to college. Only the boys were allowed. Her father knew there were no women astronomers in America, and he told Maria he would teach her all he knew. And if she studied hard, he believed that she could become an astronomer. She studied hard, read many books, and did many experiments. She discovered a comet, she earned awards and honors for her work, and she did become a famous astronomer. Many of her ideas about the stars have now been proven true. But Maria was still full of questions. How do we know God exists? How do we know what is true? Why are we here? Some people gave her answers, and some did not want her to ask those questions anymore. So Mariah knew that answers to these questions could not be found easily, so she kept asking. And Mariah joined the Unitarian Church because she had heard that there was room for an infinity of answers to an infinity of questions. And for the rest of her life, Mariah asked what and how and why, and she became a teacher at the first women's college and taught others about the stars and about giving girls the same chances as boys to go to college. And she taught others to ask questions, to experiment, and to think for themselves, and to find an infinity of answers to an infinity of questions. What do you wonder? I wonder what part you liked the best of this story. I wonder what part meant the most to you in your heart. And I wonder what kinds of questions you will ask. All right, so now it's time for the children to join me, and we go back to the RE area.
Now is the time when we intentionally offer a little something of ourselves into the world, into our congregation, that it may go forth and prosper and do good things. We recognize, in taking a collection during worship, we recognize the value of our effort to be ready to greet and to serve and to encounter all that we may encounter, all that is our life, especially when we consider the infinity of questions that are part of our human experience. And I will offer, I know there's at least twice as many questions as people in the room wherever Unitarian Universalists gather. So we gather, and so we offer a little bit of ourselves in service. As part of our service, we send a little bit of our offering out into the world. This month marks the return of our practice of Share the Plate. Half of our undesignated offering will go to a named recipient, and half will be received by the church. Our Social Impact Committee chose to start with the New Mexico Coalition for Reproductive Choice. They are working with partners in Texas, including First Unitarian Church in Dallas, to cover the costs of transportation and abortion services for people from Texas. The Texas Coalition for Reproductive Choice tries to aid up to 20 people per weekend at the cost of about $1,000 per person. So whatever we can offer will make a difference in somebody's life, like a real difference in somebody's life. The Social Impact Committee also will soon put together a list of local recipients as we continue to share the plate throughout the year. So if your offering is towards your pledge, towards your committed financial offering for the year, please indicate that in the memo line of your check or on the offering envelope. Again, half the undesignated offering goes to Share the Plate and half goes to the church operating. I want to thank everybody for your generous gifts. Any level of giving is a good level of giving. The ushers will pass the plates, and then after the plates have been passed, there'll be a time for sharing our candles of care. You're welcome to come forward and light candles in front. And now, the morning offering will be gratefully received. Will the ushers please come forward? James Villa Blake reminds us that love is the spirit of his church and service is its law. So this is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And in that spirit, this is now the time of offering our joys and sorrows. And we begin with wishes for health. We offer wishes for recovery and good health to Judith Corin Shanahan, who is recovering from dental work, to Sean Shanahan, who is recovering at home after a fall and was injured, to Nancy Venzen, who is recovering from surgery, and to Kayla Thomas, who's recovering from dental surgery. We offer our congratulations to BJ and Terrence Lindsay. They celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary on September 12th. So congratulations. And to Cinda Thompson and Keith Berry, who celebrated their 57th wedding anniversary on September 16th. 57. Wow. All right. And unfortunately, we also have a further sorrow. We offer our condolences to Terry and Tom Malone as they mourn the loss of Terry's brother-in-law, Jerry Mismer of Peoria. He passed on September 22nd. We offer our condolences, our care and concern to Terry and Tom and all who knew Jerry. In our larger world, we offer our prayers to the women of Iran and those who support them as they mourn the death of Mahsa Amini, who died in police custody, and as folks demonstrate against an oppressive regime and advocate for their human rights and liberties. We offer our prayers to the people of Puerto Rico, recovering from the latest of hurricanes, leaving more power out and resources in short supply. We also offer and recognize our care for our Jewish siblings as the new year, Rosh Hashanah, begins this evening. Shana Tova, as they say, may you have a sweet new year. Let me offer a note of prayer in that spirit. For this is a moment of beginnings. We also recognized the celebration of Mabon, the autumn equinox, this week as well. And so we turn inward to reflect about the state of our lives and ask, what lessons have we learned in the past year which new ones now call us forward? To whom do we still owe an apology or an expression of thanks? And with whom must we draw fresh boundaries? As we pause from our regular rhythms of rush, 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 we open ourselves to new perspectives and possibilities. We give thanks for these moments and for the wisdom they afford us. May they help bring us together in the sacred dynamics of life so that we, as individuals and members of the community, might reach our full potential. And as we move across a new threshold, let this new year be a year of greater awe and gratitude, of deeper kindness and acceptance, and more courageous acts of conviction. For a kinder and more equitable world is not only possible, she is on her way. And in the quietness of this sacred community, we can ever and even hear her breathing. Let us take one moment in breath, shared in this community, in this moment, and breathe into the world that is on its way, with each of us being one small part of that way. Join me. Shalom and Amen. Now I invite Jill Thomas to offer our reading for the day.
Good morning. Out of the Stars by Robert Weston. Out of the stars and their flight, out of the dust of eternity, here have we come. Stardust and sunlight mingling through time and through space. Out of the stars we have come, up from time. Out of the stars we have come. Time out of time before time, in the vastness of space, Earth spun to orbit the sun. Earth with the thunder of mountains newborn and the boilings of seas. Earth warmed by sun, lit by sunlight. This is our home. Out of the stars we have come. Mystery hidden in mystery, back through all time. Mystery rising from rocks in the storm and the sea. Out of the stars rising from rocks and the sea, kindled by sunlight, arose life. Ponder this in your heart, life up from the sea. Eyes to behold, throats to sing, mates to love. Life from the sea, warmed by the sun, washed by rain. Life from within, giving birth, rose to love. This is the wonder of time. This is the marvel of space. Out of the stars swung the earth. Life upon earth rose to love. This is the marvel of life, rising to see and to know. Out of your heart, cry wonder, sing that we live.
Please join me and rise in body or spirit for our hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. We will sing twice through. Seated. I love that moment from Robert Weston, out of the stars, invoking the great cosmos of which we are a part. Margaret Fuller would certainly agree. She also calls to the sun. She says, "It is therefore that I would have woman lay aside all thought, such as she habitually cherishes, of being taught and led by men. I would have her dedicate herself to the Son of truth, to go not where, if it beams, did not make clear the path. I would have her free from compromise, from complacence, from helplessness, because I would have her good enough and strong enough to love one and all beings from the fullness and not the poverty of being." It is so fitting to bring forth the imagery of the sun and the moon on this first Sunday after the autumnal equinox, where the power of each is felt by this world. This invoking of the naturalness of all that is around us and its greatness comes to us in part from our Transcendentalist forebears. It is a mystery and a wonder and a continuing of that line of embracing all that is around us, that direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder. Comes from folks such as Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Bronson, and Louisa May Alcott. For these people in the 1800s articulated and passed their ideas through the fire of thought and exercised their views under the sun. And we get to do this as part of our theological inheritance. Because in our conversations and in our programs, many of us look to the same sources as the Transcendentalists. We spend time with nature, we trust our intuition. These are primary sources for us. And we too seek the paths of the sun and the moon and the stars to kind of find and bolster our spirits in the world. But the way of this work has its difficulties, has its challenges. It is not always clear, and the journey can be so hard. And as we heard in the story of Maria Mitchell, the limits that are imposed on us by human bias and thought around gender, for example, was and still is enough to derail those paths. So, how did these people proceed and rise up? How did our forebears do this work? So one of those who was this planter and a fruit of the Transcendentalists was Margaret Fuller. And she was this radical feminist in the 1800s, in the early 1800s in this country. She was brilliant beyond the scope of her peers and mentors, dedicated to action as well as deep study. And there were these times in her life when she was the voice of Transcendentalism, both in theory and in practice. I mean, at one point, she was Ralph Waldo Emerson's editor. Just have pause there for a second. Emerson, who spoke of refulgent summers and the transparent eyeball and all the beautiful language, he needed an editor, and she was it. I'm just like, yeah, right? And yet we are still so much getting to know her. She's not one of those first and foremost people that comes to mind in our great history. So I want to offer us a moment to spend some time with her path and see where that may take us, what that may say to us. I mean, she was one of those, Margaret Fuller was one of those kind of square peg and round hole kind of people. She felt so bound by the limited roles in her time, even as she obtained an education that would place her alongside the leading men of the age. And socially, she was a little challenging. She wanted like all or nothing. She was fearless and intense and honest in friendship and not really made for small talk. Even someone such as Emerson didn't always know how to be her friend. And in her case, she even left her beloved country, this country, to find a course and path of freedom and companionship and love. But her journey started with her father, Timothy Fuller and Margaret Crane welcomed Sarah Margaret Fuller into the world in May 23rd, 1810. The family was Unitarian and attended First Parish in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And what possessed Timothy to provide Margaret with this education as if she could attend the all-male Harvard is a little bit of its own mystery. He might have tried to keep her busy, frankly, and engaged. But Margaret embraced the challenge. She knew the challenges that were around her in her world. And so when her father was a state senator, here's an example of the challenge he laid before her. When her father was a state senator, he wrote a message to then 3-year-old Margaret that said, "Tell Margaret I love her if she learns to read." Wait, tell Margaret I love her if she learns to read. And you know what? That actually worked. That ignited her drive. And she was, in fact, reading shortly after. She had the education of classical works of Greek and Latin and philosophy, all in elementary school. And she didn't have a lot of formal education, but they did try to make her acceptable as a lady for marriage. That had to have been interesting and frustrating. But those instructions didn't really last long because more and more she knew she was out of sync. But she excelled. She continued to excel, but what to do with her became more and more of a concern. She knew that the intellect was a huge part of life and that there was so much more. But she also knew, as she said, very early, she said, "I knew that the only object in life was to grow." The only object in life was to grow. And so traditional church worship didn't work either. And she started to turn towards this path of transcendentalism. Her father made her return to church when she was 21, but she dashed out of there as quickly as she could and went into the woods, much as Emerson and Thoreau did. And that helped her focus and deepen. And so she also was under, while she's trying to navigate all of those expectations, she also had obligations in her family. She was the full-time tutor for 5 younger siblings. And then when she was 23, life became more difficult. Her father, Timothy, died. And so Margaret became the head of house, too, and the main economic support for her family. And she wasn't able to travel as she was planning to do, but she was able to find education and work as a teacher, be acquainted with those in the Transcendentalist movement. In fact, she was the first woman to be welcomed into the formal Transcendentalist club. Emerson describes her as socially as in her circles. He says that she wore this circle of friends when I first knew her as a necklace of diamonds about her neck. They were so much to each other that Margaret seemed to represent them all, and to know her was to acquire a place with them. The confidences given to her were the best, and she held them to them. And she was an active, inspiring companion and correspondent, and all the art, thought, and nobleness in New England seemed at that moment related to her. She was everywhere a welcome guest. She was, in some ways, the center of the solar system in that moment. So in her effort, but she still had to take care of life and practicalities. So she went into teaching, one with Bronson Alcott, and then further on. And in her teaching and in her income, she was able to send her 3 brothers to Harvard. I mean, wow. She also continued to find some challenges. So women at that time couldn't offer formal lectures and be paid for them, but they could have conversations and be paid for them. So in Elizabeth Peabody's bookstore in 1839, Margaret opened her first series of conversations with all female subscribers in current topics and philosophical questions, and developed this other pool of life and conversation, as well as another source of income. She also, after the launch of that work, Emerson asked her to become the editor of a new publication. The Transcendentalists felt like they needed a whole publication to kind of get out their word, and they just created a work called The Dial, which was the main vehicle for articulating the Transcendentalist views in the time. And she was the editor. She was in the club. She was with them all. In the course of her work, she also was able to travel into the country and kind of have more experience outside of New England, and was able to, from that experience, turn to politics as well, recognizing the rights and needs for folks who were African American, for folks who were Native American, as well as women, and advocated further for social reform. She was that kind of transcendentalist, not just in the head, but in the work as well. And finally, she realized she needed an even greater level of freedom over time, and ended up being able to go to Europe in her travels. Because in Europe, she was able to move more than she was in the United States. And so, she became familiar with such luminaries as George Sand and William Wordsworth, and really had a chance to bloom amid war and revolution. In the 1840s and 1850s, Italy struggled to maintain a democracy after centuries of papal rule, and Margaret supported the revolutionaries in their bid for freedom. One of those people, one of those fighters, was the person with which she found love, the Marquess Giovanni Angelo Ossoli, won her friendship and then her heart. And so not long after their affair began, Margaret gave birth to their son, nicknamed Nino. And the record of whether they were formally married is a little unclear. The religious and social differences between Margaret and Ossoli made it really difficult enough just to have Nino baptized, never mind having a church-sanctioned wedding. But in any case, she hides the birth from her family and her peers, and has to leave her child with a wet nurse when she returns to reporting and her work across Europe, looking like she'd had nothing more adventurous than a long summer in the country. I mean, can you imagine that she had to hide the baby and also leave the baby behind and pretend that she'd been on summer vacation and then go back to work? In this moment, the war does not end well for the fighters, and the French restore the Pope in Rome. And this small family of Margaret and Ossoli and Nino, they do reunite. And they live openly for a little while before deciding what to do next. In 1850, they decide to move to the United States. They were hoping for political safety and also to publish Margaret's volume that she'd wrote on the Italian Revolution. But tragically, that new life was not to be. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, as the steamer that brought them across the Atlantic was wrecked off the shore of Fire Island at the mouth of New York Harbor. And nearly everybody died, including all of the Ossolis. The account of the storm was observed by people. There's only so much people could do, and it was just devastating. One died after another. And their lives, as well as all of the work that she brought with her, including that manuscript, were lost. And Margaret was 40 years old. Margaret's life was this quandary, challenge of a unique and powerful nature. She had to figure out step by step what to do with this genius. And yet she kept on with her search in every moment with the prayer, "Give me truth," she said. "Give me truth. Cheat me not by illusion." She kept seeking that truth that would be revealed. There were so many in her life. She had the great fortune of a friendship with Emerson and finding a voice in the emergence of Transcendentalism. She had the tragedy at the end of her life, seeing her son drown and knowing that death was coming hours before the ship finally broke apart. She was this dominating intellect who once observed to Emerson, "I know all the people worth knowing in America, and I find no intellect comparable to my own." Amen, right? And yet, Emerson also remembered that he said, "She made me laugh more than I liked. For I was, at the time, an eager scholar of ethics and tasted the sweets of solitude and stoicism, and I found something profane in the hours of amusing gossip into which she drew me." Like, Margaret got Emerson to gossip. Can we just talk about that for got Ralph to get over himself and have a good time. She was a woman who knew she had great power in her work and in her relationships. She called on women, and in fact, she called on all people to live out their truth and to be so dedicated to the Son. In her work, she had observed how justice means equal rights and equal opportunity, and realized the nature of inequality, how in our society we have structures and systems and continuations of how we treat each other as if one is better than the other. How that inequality deprives all of us, no matter where we fall in the hierarchy of society. This is in the early 1800s she's having this conversation. We're still having that conversation today, right? Unequal treatment hurts all of us. On the bicentennial of her death, one person observed that it's really revealing how we lift up what men do and what men do in the claim of transcendentalism and not understand how significant her role was. In so many ways, she is deeply embedded in our entire movement, in our cultural history, as well as in Unitarian Universalism. And in preparing, in thinking about Margaret, go back to thinking about her, and kind of, every now and then I feel so good about being so progressive, right? Yeah, we're moving along. I got my rainbows. I got all my things, right? And then to read what she was advocating for and what she was observing was oh, she is way ahead. She is way ahead. A life like hers reminds us of our power in our times of powerlessness, our sources of strength in all moments, especially tapping into that direct experience of transcending mystery of wonder, as well as the words and deeds of prophetic people that challenge us to confront the structures of evil, to confront them with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Her story is one of those that helps us find our way. Remembering her is not to make an idol or confer upon her sainthood, although, wow, she performed miracles. But it is to remember a woman with a life as complicated as ours, driven by the search for authentic living and a world made better because we have been in it. She said, "Those who seem overladen with electricity frighten those around them. Those who seem overladen with electricity frighten those around them, she wrote. I think maybe we should take up some of that charge. Let us live in that energy, dedicated as she was to the sun, that we may be more powerful, more confident, more courageous to live in the total fullness of our own beings. So may it be. Amen. Please rise in body or spirit and join me for singing our closing hymn, number 108. My Life Flows On in Endless Song, verses 1 and 3. If you have knowledge, let others light their candles at it. If you have knowledge, let others light their candles in it. If you have knowledge, let others light their candles with it. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. Our worship is ended. Let our service begin.